Good day, everyone. I'm sure the first group has already discussed the importance of studying public finance, its scope, and role in our economy. Now, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you think the Philippines is producing fewer public goods than our neighboring countries? Or is the government falling short in how it manages public funds? Take a moment to reflect on that. Before we dive deeper, we prepared a short clip for you to watch.
Neda asked the public about some of the most common economic concepts that we use. Here are some of their answers.
Economics, distribution of goods and how it circulates.
Economics yan eh.
Gross domestic performance, if I'm not mistaken.
Hindi ko na ano yung GDP, ano bang kabuuan?
Gross domestic product.
Hindi siya pamilyar sa
Inflation, paano inflation? Inflation yung pagbaba ng value ng pera.
Pag lobo, di ba? Pag lobo, pag inflate.
Yes.
Import, para ito yung hinahangaan, ganun.
Hindi ko alam yung import natin for India. Hindi lang namin alam masyado.
So, exports, mga product naman nagaling dito sa Pilipinas na dinadala naman natin sa ibang bansa.
Taripa? Ano yun, ma'am? Raffles?
Tariffs yung taxes involved in sa export and imports. Yung mga taxes na kailangan natin bayaran to get those goods.
Manufacturing. Ano ba ito?
manufactured, mga kumpanya.
Manufacturing, when you produce or create a product.
Labor force. Hindi ko na ano yan, pero yung labor alam ko. Hindi ko alam kung anong ibig sabihin ng force na yun, kung sino yung pinu-force.
Of course, for us economists, these concepts are basic. But for majority of Filipinos, these are words that they hear but don't necessarily understand. That's unfortunate because we know that economics plays out in everyday life, in our work, in our communities, in our families, in the very decisions that we make on a daily basis. Economists tend to talk in highly technical terms. We tend to talk only to each other. That leaves most other people out of very important conversations. Economists actually have a lot of useful ideas and insights to share. Pero sayang naman kung hindi naman nila tayo naiintindihan ng karamihan. So let's challenge ourselves to become more effective thought leaders by making an effort to make economics comprehensible and relatable to all. Let's help empower our fellow Filipinos through economic and financial literacy. By sharing what we know, we are helping others make good decisions not only for themselves, but also for our country.
By the end of this lesson, we shall be able to first to understand the evolution of public finance, second is to examine the Philippine context in public finance, and third, to identify the government initiatives for market competitiveness.
As we watch the video clip, it might resonate with some of us or remind us that many people are still unaware of important economic terms. This video serves as both an awareness tool or a reminder that despite living in this world for so long, there are still many Filipinos who lack understanding of this crucial concept that impact our economy. In this discussion, we will dive deeper into how public finance has developed over the years. If we remember how money evolved from cowrie shells and bartering onto the complex system we use today, you'll see that the development of public finance institutions mirrors the growth of organized society, especially the state. So, are we an organized society? As the responsibilities of the state changed, so did the goals of public finance. In essence, the government has always played a key role in shaping how public funds are collected and utilized. Public financing is as old as the concept of public authority itself, with its history marked by wars, social movements, and revolutions. The lifeblood of the government is the taxes collected from the people. So, before the Spanish colonization, the Philippines had a rich local cultural history, including trading interaction with our neighboring countries such as China, Japan, Java, Thailand, and many more. The Philippines was considered to have a semi-communal or the semi-slave social system. According to International Monetary Fund or IMF, by 1950, the production had been restored to its pre-war level. So, in the early 1950s, the economy grew at a rate of about 7% annually. And in the latter half of the decade, after the reconstruction phase had ended, it grew at about 5%. Relatively speaking, in 1960, the exchange rate was 3 Philippine pesos to 1 US dollar. So, a stark contrast in today's rate. Additionally, with the establishment of the Philippine Commonwealth, the Budget Office was formally created under the Department of Finance. So, these are some significant events that shape our history. For today, we'll trace more about public finance institutions across various stages of society's development with a particular emphasis on the Philippine context. Let's start in early public finance. Public finance originated with the creation of the state, driven by the need to protect and promote human welfare. As the state evolved, so did public finance, initially to preserve the state and fund its activities. From primitive societies, with nothing to speak of, we advanced to slave states, the feudal system, the capitalist system, marked by the periods such as mercantilism and Keynesian public finance. We will also discuss the influence of Western public finance institutions and the Philippine settings today. Let's begin with Asian finance, or the slave societies. The public finance systems of slave societies lay the foundation for many modern financial practices. Asian public finance introduced basic instruments like budgeting, expenditure management, revenue collections, debt, and borrowing. Let's break down these concepts. Expenditures. In ancient government, public spending was tied to key functions. First, in defense and aggression, large amounts were spent on maintaining armies and navies for protection and conquest. Second is internal peace and order. To prevent rebellion among the majority population, the ruling minority focused on law enforcement and administration of justice. Third is state religion. Religion was integral to stabilizing the ruling order. Elaborate bureaucracies and massive temples were built, which is why religious leaders like friars in the Philippines were so powerful and often abusive. Fourth is the royal maintenance. It was considered a sovereign right for the kings to be supported by their people, who were obligated to provide revenue for whatever the king deemed necessary for public welfare. While revenues in ancient times came from simple sources such as looting, tributes from conquered peoples, war chests, fines, and direct taxes on non-citizens or conquered peoples. Additionally, wealthy citizens were expected to delay. Public borrowing and debt management, on the other hand, borrowing as we know it didn't exist. Instead, the state relied on gifts or levied taxes in times of need, unlike today's government that is often rely on loans and debt. Last is auditing. Asian public finance focus on tax collections and expenditure. Auditing has been recognized and practiced since Spanish occupation. So they called it residencia. And this residencia is an inquiry into the administration of the outgoing Governor General and to others official. So this suggests that an early form of internal auditing was practiced and given a strict regulation. Let's proceed to medieval public finance. Public finance during the Middle Ages evolved with political structures. Significant changes included first is the taxation and revenue collection. These were adapted based on available resources and the nature of the subjects. Second is the public expenditure. The scope and application of public spending expanded. Third is the accounting and auditing. Like what I said earlier, this system became more tangible and structured. Last is the public borrowing. As government expenses increased, so the borrowing became more institutionalized. So during feudal period, economic system based on la tenure emerged between the king, lord, and vassals. The feudal system dominated society, with the king granting lands to the nobility in exchange for military service. Vassals, in turn, were tenants of the nobles and peasants who had to work on this land, providing homage, labor, and a share of their produce in return for protection. Over time, however, abuses of power became more common, especially in the case of the encomenderos who controlled and lands and often oppressed the native populations. For the beginning of public finance, this is the end. Let's proceed to the capitalism, and Miss Freya and Val will do the honor.
Now let us move on to the emergence of mercantilism, some of their important contributions, and physiocracy. This idea shaped how nations managed their economies during this time and influenced future economic thinking. Mercantilism was the dominant economic theory in Europe from the 16th to the 18th century, in which the state has the significant control over economic activities. Protectionism was the practice used to shield domestic industries from foreign competition and by way of creating trade surplus that will favor domestically and not other countries. Mercantilism promoted the idea that nations could become wealthy and powerful by having control to trading, manufacturing, and land cultivation. Its focus was on developing industry in towns rather than the countryside, and the government played a pivotal role in managing those economic activities. Mercantilists believed that accumulating bullion was essential for increasing national power. Mercantilists believed that accumulating bullion was essential for increasing national power. With that, countries aimed to maximize their wealth by exporting goods to bring in gold and silver while minimizing imports to avoid losing wealth. Mercantilists believed that wealth was finite and one's nation's gain was another's loss. It is a zero-sum game which discourages cooperation within an economy. Mercantilist policies also had a big impact on trade and government strategies. As I have already said, this theory has the idea that a nation's wealth depended on its reserves of gold and silver. So, more gold is equal to more wealth, and trade as a zero-sum game is the most vital part of that accumulation. Governments also encourage exports by providing subsidies to industries while at the same time discouraging imports through high tariffs. This way, more gold and silver would flow into the country rather than outside. With that, they also restricted private ownership and use of bullion to ensure that the state maintained control over those resources. Additionally, colonies were also used for one-way trade, where raw materials were extracted and then manufactured goods were sent back. Mercantilism also influenced how governments manage public finances. The state took an active role in guiding the economy through various implementations of policies. One of those examples is how the governments use taxes and budgets to encourage exports and limit imports. This way of control over economic activities was aimed at driving national prosperity. The idea was to gather wealth through a positive balance of trade while keeping as much gold and silver as possible within the country. Moving into the 18th century, another economic theory emerged known as physiocracy. This thought originated in France and was particularly influential during the second half of the century. Physiocrats believed that true wealth came from agriculture rather than trade or industry, contrary to mercantilism. Physiocrats introduced several key ideas. One of their most famous concepts was laissez-faire, which means let do or leave it alone. They believe that free markets should operate in minimal government intervention with a view that natural economic forces would lead to the most efficient outcomes. Another important idea was the single tax system. Physiocrats argued that land was the only true source of wealth, so only landowners should be taxed. They believed was the most fair and efficient way to fund the government. They saw agriculture as the foundation of a nation's wealth because it produced a surplus that could support other sectors of the economy. Their ideas marked a shift from the state-controlled approach of mercantilism to a more natural or hands-off economic policy. Finally, physiocrats were influenced by Enlightenment thinking, particularly the idea that natural laws govern economic activities, just like they govern the physical world. They believed that economies should function in line with natural laws. By natural law, I mean it is a system of belief that there are moral standards inherent in human nature, such as our individual rights. To sum up, mercantilism and physiocracy offered very different ideas about how wealth should be created and managed. Mercantilism focused on state control, trade, and the accumulation of gold and silver. Contrary to that, physiocracy highlighted the importance of agriculture, free markets, and aligning economic activity within natural laws. While mercantilism prioritized industrial development and government intervention, physiocracy called for less interference and recognized the central role of agriculture in generating wealth. These contrasting ideas laid the foundation for classical economics, influencing economists like Adam Smith and shaping future economic policies.
Now let's move on to the Depression and Keynesian economics. It explores the relationship between the economic theory of John Maynard Keynes and the historical context of the Great Depression. Depressions or recessions occur when there is not enough demand for all the goods and services that an economy produces. Most economists believe that such falling demand is a normal part of what is commonly called a business cycle. A business cycle is like a regular pattern where the economy grows, reaches a peak, then slows down, and sometimes even shrinks, which we call a recession, before it starts growing again.
It consists of four key stages. First is expansion, when demand and production grow, leading to more job and higher income. Next is peak, the highest point of economic activity, followed by a downturn or a recession, characterized by falling demand and economic activity. And the last one is trough, the lowest point after which the cycle repeats, starting with recovery. The demand for two specific types of goods, durable goods and capital goods, is important in the business cycle. Durable goods, these are items like cars and refrigerators that you use for a long time. People buy more of these when they have more money and feel confident about their financial future. When they feel less confident, they stop buying as much. Capital goods, these are the tools and equipment businesses use to make products. Companies buy more equipment when they think people will buy their products. If they doubt people will buy, they won't invest in new equipment. As the old durable goods start wearing out and need replacement, factories start producing again to meet this new demand. This production requires hiring workers and buying materials, which help the economy grow again. Additionally, when prices are low, people are more likely to buy more goods, helping the economy recover. Prices change in the business cycle. When the demand increases, prices usually go up. When the demand decreases, prices usually go down. Example, in the mid-1920s, the US economy was at a high point. Many people bought homes, cars, and household items, which led to more jobs and higher pay. Cities expanded and there was significant spending on infrastructure like roads and utilities, further boosting the economy. In simple terms, the business cycle is like a natural rhythm of the economy with ups and downs. During good times, people buy more and the economy grows. During tough times, people buy less, which can lead to slowdown, but eventually things start to pick up again as needs and confidence rebuild. In the late 1920s, people started buying fewer houses and cars. Cities and state weren't starting many new projects because they had already built most of the things they needed. By the summer of 1929, people in the US were spending less money overall, and companies began to make fewer products because they saw that demand was dropping. At first, many people thought this slowdown would be temporary. They saw stock prices go up again and felt hopeful. Even though many people didn't have jobs, local groups and charities were helping them and telling them that things would get better soon. They said good times were just around the corner. This meant they believed the economy would hit its lowest point soon and then start to improve. However, this recovery didn't happen as expected. People continue to spend less money, businesses keep reducing their staff, and many companies had to close down because they couldn't make enough money to survive. This period marked the beginning of a very tough economic time. In 1930, a significant number of banks collapsed, causing many people to lose their savings. This made fewer people able to buy goods and services, which lowered the demand in the market. As the economic situation got worse, the money set aside by state and local governments for emergency help quickly ran out. This left many people who had previously lived comfortably without jobs and struggling to afford basic needs like food and shelter. As the economic problems continue, President Franklin Roosevelt introduced several programs to help those affected. These programs, known as the New Deal, aimed to provide relief and support recovery. However, the New Deal only partially succeeded in fixing the economy. Throughout the 1930s, business activities did not pick up much, and many people remained unemployed. According to John Maynard Keynes, the Great Depression, a severe economic downturn that occurred in the 1930s, was mainly caused by a significant drop in total demand. This means that people and businesses were not buying or investing as much as before. The situation was so bad that normal methods to boost the economy were not enough. To solve this problem, the government had to step in and spend a lot of money. This government spending helped to increase demand by creating jobs and funding projects, which in turn helped to revive the economy. Jaime Nordines was an important economist who introduced new ideas about how economies work during the 1930s. He observed that during tough economic times like the Great Depression, people and businesses spend less money. When people are out of work, they can't buy as many things, and businesses see this and decide to produce less because they don't think they will sell enough. This leads to more people losing their jobs, creating a cycle of less spending and more unemployment. Kina suggested that in such situations, the government need to step in and spend more money to break the cycle. He believed that by doing so, the government could create jobs and encourage more spending by both people and businesses. According to Keynes, it wasn't enough to just hope the businesses would start borrowing more money if interest rates were lowered, which was what earlier economists called classical economists believe. During the Great Depression, the US government initially did the opposite of what Keynes recommended. It raised taxes and cut spending to try to balance its budget, which made the economic situation worse. It was not until the late 1930s and earlier 1940s as the US prepared for a World War II and began spending a lot more on military production that significant government spending helped reduce unemployment dramatically. Keynes' ideas showed that sometimes the government needs to spend more even if it means borrowing money to kickstart the economy and help reduce unemployment. This approach became more popular among economists, historians, and politicians after they saw how it helped during the Great Depression.
Discussions is about the impact of Western public finance institutions in other least developing countries. So, Western countries includes nations that are among the top developed countries in the world in terms of economic development. They have a significant role in shaping global economic advancement, particularly public finance, through policy formulations and implementations. Their impact in other developing countries can be seen in financial assistance, economic policies, and global financial standards. Western public finance institutions refers to a range of establishment, organizations, and institutions that are engaged in managing public finances in Western countries such as the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Western public finance institutions refers to a range of establishment, organizations, and institutions that are engaged in managing public finances in Western countries such as the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. These institutions are responsible for the effective management of all related public finance activities such as public spending and budgeting. And also, Western public finance institutions include public financial institutions, regulatory bodies and agencies, and government departments and agencies. So, we have identified four major impacts of Westerns. First is the influence of formulations and implementations of policies, establishing financial management frameworks and economic policies in developing nations is aided by Western public finance institutions, such as the well-known World Bank and the International Monetary Fund or IMF. For an instance, these international organizations, particularly the IMF, provides loans with, of course, conditions to its members' country. In practice, it is very difficult for the recipient countries or the countries that borrowed money from IMF to refuse the implementations of IMF policies prescriptions in the context of an IMF loan. Next is the economic stabilization. During economic crisis, the influence of Western public finance for economic stability is evident. In addition to offering financial support during time of crisis, the IMF also offers policies recommendations and medical aid to nations that affected and are working towards recovery. Moreover, the central bank, also an international organizations, can influence global market conditions by adjusting the interest rate or engagement in open market operations. An example of economic stabilization is the support of World Bank to the Philippines on January 2023. The World Bank Boards of Executive Directors approved the financing support to the Philippine government to boost the resiliency and sustainability of our financial sector and, of course, to strengthen economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The $600 million Philippines Second Financial Sector Reform Development Policy financing provides continuing support to three policies reform areas, including the strengthening financial sector stability, integrity, and resilience. This financial support aids in expanding the financial inclusion for individuals and firms, especially the micro, small, and the medium enterprises. Next is the global financial standards. The public finance systems of numerous nations worldwide are frequently impacted by international financial and regulatory regulations. Numerous institutional problems have been identified in search on the implementation of Western accounting standards and auditing in forms of nations. These guidelines may therefore have an impact on how the nations create their own financial system and manage the public asset. Example of this is the allowing of International Monetary Fund's recommendations with a vivid desire to join the European Union. The Romania embraced swift change to their legislations after the 1989, and with a view to turning into a market-based economy, also adopted Western modes of accounting regulations. Lastly is the capacity building and technical assistance. The Western institutions, particularly those in the US and Europe, provide trainings on better governance as well as support and expertise in strengthening the attributes of institutions in developing nations. For an instance, the IMF provides headquarters-based technical assistance expert and expert in the field employed by the IMF. Moreover, the development of local government officials and institutions' abilities and capacities has been a distinct focus of the World Bank's public sector reform program in Nepal. This includes classes on policy analysis, procurement, and public financial management that are designed to strengthen the local government's capacity to provide service.
The Philippines is a diverse country with rich cultures, beliefs, and abundant natural resources that can uplift both the people and the economy. After the pandemic, the Philippines was among the first to recover from the global economic downturn caused by COVID-19. Now, in 2024, it's essential to assess how the country's economic performance compares to previous years. So starting locally, let's examine the Consumer Price Index or CPI of Camarines Norte as of August 9, 2024. Camarines Norte's inflation rate for June 2024 stands at 4.8%, which is significantly lower than the 5.7% recorded during the same month last year. However, this figure represents an increase of 0.3% compared to the 4.5% inflation rate noted in May 2024. The next slide shows the data from July 2023 to July 2024 for Camarines Norte shows a fluctuating inflation trend. Inflation peaked at 8.5% in September 2023 and then steadily decreased, reaching its lowest point at 3.0% in January 2024. Afterward, inflation began to rise again, stabilizing around 4.2% to 4.8% from April to July 2024. The purchasing power of the peso decreased consistently over the period, starting at 0.81 in July 2023 and dropping to 0.77 by July 2024, indicating that the inflation reduced the value of the peso over time. So how does this data affect the public finance system in our province? So the inflation trends in Camarines Norte directly impact public finance. Rising inflation reduces the real value of government revenues and increases public spending needs, particularly for social programs and subsidies. This pressures the government to adjust fiscal policies and manage debt carefully. Additionally, sustained inflation can deter investment, slowing economic growth and further straining public finances. So effective coordination of monetary and fiscal policy is crucial to maintaining economic stability and protecting the purchasing power of citizens. Now that we've covered local matters, let's take a look at the broader economic growth here in the Philippines. After the pandemic, as we adjusted to the new normal, questions arise about how the government has managed public finance. This includes their strategies for economic recovery, fiscal policies, and overall financial management, which are crucial for the country's sustained growth and stability. Recently, the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, has sparked controversy with its assertion that a budget of 21 pesos for 1 meal per day is sufficient. This statement was made during discussions surrounding the proposed budget for 2025. NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan explained that individuals spending less than 64 pesos daily. The Philippines is a diverse country with rich cultures, beliefs, and abundant natural resources that can uplift both the people and the economy. After the pandemic, the Philippines was among the first to recover from the global economic downturn caused by COVID-19. Now, in 2024, it's essential to assess how the country's economic performance compares to previous years. So starting locally, let's examine the Consumer Price Index or CPI of Camarines Norte as of August 9, 2024. Camarines Norte's inflation rate for June 2024 stands at 4.8%, which is significantly lower than the 5.7% recorded during the same month last year. However, this figure represents an increase of 0.3% compared to the 4.5% inflation rate noted in May 2024. The next slide shows the data from July 2023 to July 2024 for Camarines Norte shows a fluctuating inflation trend. Inflation peaked at 8.5% in September 2023 and then steadily decreased, reaching its lowest point at 3.0% in January 2024. Afterward, inflation began to rise again, stabilizing around 4.2% to 4.8% from April to July 2024. The purchasing power of the peso decreased consistently over the period, starting at 0.81 in July 2023 and dropping to 0.77 by July 2024, indicating that the inflation reduced the value of the peso over time. So how does this data affect the public finance system in our province? So the inflation trends in Camarines Norte directly impact public finance. Rising inflation reduces the real value of government revenues and increases public spending needs, particularly for social programs and subsidies. This pressures the government to adjust fiscal policies and manage debt carefully. Additionally, sustained inflation can deter investment, slowing economic growth and further straining public finances. So effective coordination of monetary and fiscal policy is crucial to maintaining economic stability and protecting the purchasing power of citizens. Now that we've covered local matters, let's take a look at the broader economic growth here in the Philippines. After the pandemic, as we adjusted to the new normal, questions arise about how the government has managed public finance. This includes their strategies for economic recovery, fiscal policies, and overall financial management, which are crucial for the country's sustained growth and stability. Recently, the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, has sparked controversy with its assertion that a budget of 21 pesos for one meal per day is sufficient. This statement was made during discussions surrounding the proposed budget for 2025. NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan explained that individuals spending less than 64 pesos daily for food are considered food poor. He stated that this amount, which translates to about 21 pesos per meal, is based on a monthly food threshold of 9,581 for a family of 5. And Balisacan acknowledged that this threshold has increased from 55 pesos per person in 2021 and is expected to rise to 67 pesos in 2025. The NEDA chief clarified that the thresholds are adjusted for inflation to effectively monitor the government's poverty reduction strategies. However, this has led to criticism from lawmakers and activists who argue that such low figures do not reflect the realities faced by many Filipinos. And Senator Grace Poe highlighted that using updated metrics undermines the accuracy of poverty forecasts. Balisacan agreed that it is time to reassess the poverty threshold, noting that the basket of goods used for calculation has not been updated for over a decade. He emphasized the need to consider food preferences and relative prices in any revisions. In response to the backlash, Balisacan reiterated that the food threshold is not intended to represent a budget for a decent standard of living, but rather serves as a tool to measure the effectiveness of government policies in addressing poverty. He acknowledged that, while the statistics provide a sense of scale, they do not capture the full extent of deprivation experienced by many Filipinos. As a student who still relies on my parents for my allowance to attend school, I can attest that the NEDA's claim of a 21 pesos budget being sufficient for a single meal is far from reality, especially in the face of rising inflation. The statement seems detached from the actual experiences of many Filipinos. Even a simple glance at current prices reveals the impracticality of this assertion. A simple cup of noodles, a common meal option for students, costs around 21 pesos 50 cents at SM supermarkets. This means that based on NEDA's suggested budget, one would be short by 50 cents just for this basic meal. The situation becomes even more challenging when considering the prices at sari-sari stores. These small neighborhood stores often have to increase their prices slightly to generate income, making the 21 pesos budget even more unrealistic. It is important to note that the prices of various commodities, particularly food items, have been steadily increasing due to the ongoing inflationary pressures. This makes it increasingly difficult for individuals, especially students like myself who rely on limited budgets, to afford even the most basic meals. In addition to the issue surrounds, other government sectors in the Philippines are also facing challenges related to the public financial system. One significant concern involves the handling of funds within PhilHealth. Professor Shelo Magno from the University of the Philippines is concerned about the government's decision to take money from PhilHealth, the National Health Insurance Program, and use it for other purposes. She says this shows bigger problems with how the government manages its money. The government included 450 billion in projects in the national budget without setting aside money for them. So this means important things like paying health workers and building infrastructure don't have enough funding. Instead of fixing this, the government is taking 89.9 billion from PhilHealth to pay these unfunded projects. Magno argues this is probably against the law. The law says PhilHealth's money can only be used to extend health services or lower insurance premiums, not to fund other government projects. She has filed a case in the Supreme Court to challenge the government's actions. Magno believes the government should focus on making PhilHealth better, not taking its money. Many Filipinos, like those with leukemia, don't get all the health coverage they need. If the government used PhilHealth's money to improve health services, it would help more people, and these issues reflect the broader concerns about the management of public funds in the Philippines and the need for greater accountability and transparency in how healthcare resources are allocated. Many Filipinos see themselves as either rich or poor, with some identifying as middle class. The 2021 Family Income and Expenditure Survey, or FIES, by the Philippine Statistics Authority outlined 7 income categories. Number 1 is poor, incomes below the poverty line, low, but not poor, incomes between the poverty line and double the poverty line, lower middle, incomes between double and 4 times the poverty line, middle, incomes between 4 and 7 times the poverty line, upper middle, incomes between 7 and 12 times the poverty line, upper middle, but not rich, incomes between 12 and 20 times the poverty line, and rich incomes at least 20 times the poverty line. The survey, covering over 26.3 million households and 111.4 million people, shows that most Filipinos are classified as low income but not poor, while the wealthy represent a smaller segment. The Philippine Statistics Authority has been conducting the Family Income and Expenditure Survey every 3 years since 1985. With the latest rounds in mid-2023 and early 2024, a recent survey found that about 13 million households, or 47%, viewed themselves as poor, while 33% as middle income and 20% as low income. Unemployment significantly affects poverty, with rates dropping from 4.2% to 3.6%, equating to 1.83 million unemployed individuals. National Economic and Development Authority Secretary Arsenio Balisacan highlighted the need to grow the digital economy to improve job opportunities. Moving on, the House Committee is reviewing the proposed 5.678 trillion national budget for 2024. This budget supports President Marcos Jr.'s plans for the country and focuses on improving social services, infrastructure, and the economy. It's a 9.5% increase from last year and aims to raise more tax money, reduce the country's debt, and manage government spending responsibly. A large portion of the budget will go to social programs and local government support. With inflation still high, the government is working on strategies to keep prices stable and ensure that everyone benefits from economic growth. Overall, the 2024 budget aims to drive economic progress while addressing the needs of the people. Now that we have tackled all the current issues here in the Philippines related to public finance, such as NEDA's food budget proposal and healthcare funding, it reflects ongoing challenges. Both of these issues illustrate a broader problem with public financial management in the Philippines. There is a clear disconnect between government policies and the realities faced by ordinary citizens. To build trust in government institutions and improve the quality of life for Filipinos, policymakers must prioritize transparency and accountability. They need to ensure that public funds are used effectively to meet the actual needs of the population, especially in critical areas like food security and healthcare. Addressing these challenges is essential for fostering a more equitable and responsive government.